Hello everyone, this is Professor Reimer. This video is again from my world history class on Wednesday, January 6th and Thursday, January 7th. It is part 2 of this lesson's video, so if you did not watch part 1, stop this video, go back and watch the other one. If not, you'll be really confused. This is part 2 of our Unit 5 DOL 1A lesson on the Ottoman Empire. Remember, we are explaining the causes and effects of the rise of the Ottoman Empire by writing a diary entry from the point of view of an Ottoman subject. In the first video, I primarily focused on the rise of the Ottoman Empire, the expansion of the Ottoman Empire. We looked at the series of maps to see how their land grew. Now in this video, we're going to talk more about what was life like living in the Ottoman Empire. That way you can write a much better diary entry. So here we are. Remember, it is considered a gunpowder empire. It wasn't the only one, but it was one of the main ones because it used its mastery of firearms to unify a vast territory of conquered regions. Very key there. They are conquerors of other regions. They are led by their supreme leader called a sultan, who divided up the territories, the empire, into districts and provinces and governed by bureaucratic officials under his control. What do we call this? Centralization, right? He is at the top of a very structured, centralized government structure. We will get into that more in just a minute. The subjects of the Ottoman Empire divided into four main occupational groups. The peasants, who worked the land of the Sultan, because all land of the empire was technically the Sultan's. Now, he did give some away to some of his more favorite and important officials, but in general, the peasants are working land that's not theirs. They are working the Sultan's lands. Then there are the artisans. These are people who make things like silk tapestries or weapons or things of that nature. Merchants, the traders, and pastoral people. Remember, the Ottomans were originally pastoral nomads. And lastly, they were generally tolerant of non-Muslims and afforded more rights to women. So they basically allowed non-Muslims to live as they wanted, as long as they obeyed the Sultan, right? Pledged loyalty to the Sultan and paid a tax for tax was levied on all non-Muslims in the empire. But so as long as you do that, you were pretty much autonomous. Now, you weren't, this is not anarchy. So with these non-Muslims, we're talking about Christians and Jews and other groups. They were governed by their own leaders, typically religious leaders who made the laws and enforced the laws. And as long as there was no social unrest and the Sultan was obeyed, then they were left alone. All right. Speaking of the Sultan, now he is at the top of the both political structure of the empire, but also the religious structure of the. Remember, this is very centralized. So as Sultan, he is the political leader. He is in charge. All decisions, all laws, all justice flow through him. But as you saw in the last video, with an empire that large, it's not possible for one man to make all the decisions and possess all of the information. So he has several helpers, which we're going to talk about. Top chief is the Grand Vizier. Think of this. I don't know. Think of it as like the chief of staff to the president. This is a man who, and it was a man. This is a man who made most of the decisions, especially as the sultans became less interested in political decisions. The Grand Viziers are basically running the empire with the assistance of the Divan, or the Imperial Council. Think of it like our president's cabinet, right? You had this in our president, in our cabinet. The president has Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, Secretary of Health and Human Resources. All of these secretaries are in charge of various parts of the bureaucracy, or the government officials, the ones who are in charge with defending and collecting the taxes and running the economy, right? So the Ottoman Sultan has something very similar, this imperial council, and they made all of the decisions ultimately with the blessing of the Sultan, but not always with him giving a lot of input. All right. Now, there are a couple other groups we need to talk about. So the military, right, has two main units. They are the Sipahi cavalry. So cavalry are mounted warriors. So these are warriors on horses. These are freeborn Muslims, meaning they're not slaves, and they're born Muslims. And these are, think of these like the elite of society, right? These are the large landowners. These are the wealthy individuals. But as you know, countless other empires throughout time, right? The Sultan is constantly having to deal with these power struggles between him and the elite. And so what the Ottomans did is create this totally separate power base from these landed freeborn Muslims. And that power structure was known as the Janissaries. Now, I know I put down slaves there, and technically they were slaves, but they are not slaves like you studied in 8th grade in the American South. They're not even slaves like we looked at earlier in East Africa. These are slaves with enormous amounts of power and responsibility and training. So the way it worked is there would be a collection every year in which the Ottoman authorities would go to a variety of non-Muslim areas, typically the Christian communities of Eastern Europe, and they would require a tax of small boys who would then be taken to the capital. Now, these boys were tested to see their abilities, and if they proved to have some abilities, they were then trained, and they were trained in two areas. They were either trained to be pashas, those civil service bureaucrats. So these would have been people who are skilled in reading and writing, skilled in languages, skilled in analytical thinking, who would have run sort of the civil part of the empire, or they would have found themselves in the elite Janissary infantry, which I put there as a slave army, and it was, but they were slaves to the Sultan. They owed their loyalty to the Sultan. They converted to Islam. They were able to amass enormous amounts of power and wealth, but they were not allowed to pass that wealth and power to their children. Why? Because they were not allowed to marry. They were forbidden to marry. So they couldn't develop a family, couldn't form a family, couldn't create a family, and then couldn't have that family grow over the generations in wealth and power and come to rival the Sultan's power. And so this was a very key way that the Ottomans, for many centuries, were able to maintain control of their empire. Now, also, the Sultan was the Caliph. Remember, this is the ultimate religious authority in Sunni Islam, and the Ottomans were Sunni Muslims, not Shia Muslims. Those were the Safavids in what is today Persia. But again, the Sultan can't possibly make all religious decisions for his subjects, so he relied on a group of religious advisors known as the ulama. So these are the individuals that are running the madrasas, the religious schools. They are enforcing the religious laws, etc., etc. So at the top of this society, of this political and religious society, is the Sultan, but he has a vast bureaucratic network of advisors helping him run the empire. And remember, I said in the other slide that women were treated a bit more equally. They were allowed to own and inherit property, which is not true of other Muslim societies at the time. They weren't forced into marriages. Why is this? Possibly it has its roots in the nomadic origins of the Ottomans. Remember, in nomadic societies, men and women tend to be more equal because a partnership is, a strong equal partnership is required for survival of the group. All right, to the assignment. All right, so what I want you to do is reflect on what you've learned about the Ottoman Empire's methods of conquest. We saw that in the first video with the sacking of Constantinople, and the effectiveness of its rule, what we were just talking about with the Janissaries and the autonomy granted to different groups. And then I want you to write a diary entry as one of the following people. You get to choose, right? You can choose to be one of the 4 sultans. Osman, remember, one of the early sultans, very small amount of territory in Anatolia. Mehmed II, the sultan who conquered Constantinople. Selim I, the one who conquered most of the Muslim or the Islamic heartland. Or Suleiman I, who invaded Hungary and laid siege to Vienna. Or you could choose to be a person living in one of the conquered areas. Maybe you imagine yourself as a Christian or as a Jew in one of these conquered areas. Or you can imagine yourself as a soldier in the Ottoman Empire, whether it be as one of the Sipahi cavalry, those rich, powerful, landowning members of society, or as a janissary. And I want you to tell me about the Ottomans, right? What you've learned about the Ottomans' methods of conquest, the effectiveness of its rule, and whether or not your life was improved or not improved living under the Ottoman Empire's rule. So put yourself in the shoes of one of these individuals. Pretend you're that person, and like craft a story, craft a diary entry in which you reflect on your life. Show me that you have learned about the Ottoman Empire's methods of conquest and the effectiveness of its rule. All right, I can't wait to see and read your diary entries. Until next time, I'll see you later.